And this is episode 46.
46, yes. How is everything?
Oh, pretty good, thank you. Yes.
Mm,
Yes, I think I was a little unwell in the last week, but that didn't last very long. I think it's probably more than anything the fact that I have, as I mentioned there, I have a bit of a problem with sometimes not sleeping enough. I think that may have
hmm
problems. So
Yeah, right.
I have to be very disciplined with my sleep and try to get
Uh,
7 hours.
Yeah, you're busy and you've got a trip coming up, so I think,
And lots
you
of
need to
things
take care of
going on.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. It's nothing worse than being sick on a trip, actually.
Hmm Yeah.
Yes. So I've got a few things to mention. I don't know if you have anything lined up tonight, Vernon, or this morning for
I
you.
I believe that you're going to be the one leading on the topics this time. I've actually resolved to try and actually think of something worth talking about, but oftentimes I fail. But and you're usually better at this. So yeah. Well, I
I
mean, there's
usually,
so one thing I will mention that I could think of is of course, Obama telling people to man up, and not vote for Trump. That's all I can think of right now is the
yeah,
yeah.
it's a good point actually.
Mhm.
I usually, just basically make a note of items in the news, but every once in a while I'm still working on my book, which is nearing completion, Victorian Fallacy, and I actually was going through and I have a couple of ancient items because I don't think everybody's quite as excited by ancient history as I am, but I do have a couple of items from ancient history that I'm going to mention.
Mhm. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
2,000 years old and they're still relevant today.
hmm
So the first one I want to mention is Yvonne Gray. So for those who don't know, Captain Yvonne Gray is a captain in the New Zealand Navy. A lot of people have heard what happened. A New Zealand Navy ship it was near a Pacific island and was doing some sort of scientific research, I think surveying the reef or something along those lines, and or naval research. And the ship ran aground and then caught fire and then started to sink. And Captain Gray has ordered an evacuation. Now, it's there's going to be an inquiry, so we haven't seen the inquiry yet. It sounds like she ordered an evacuation fairly quickly
hmm
after it caught fire and ran aground, caught fire, started to sink. Uh, there've been initially there were quite a number of reports coming out of New Zealand as people really praising the captain for doing this,
hmm
as saying basically this saved lives. Some people were injured, but there were no fatalities. Well, I think it was something like I've heard different numbers actually, 75 and 78. I think were both thrown around fairly early as to the number of people who were on board.
hmm
So very fortunately, while there were some injuries, nobody died in what is a very serious incident. But anyway, the ship went down and is now on the reef, and I think is probably a total loss from what I understand. There's going to be an inquiry in New Zealand. Now, I think this is interesting actually because this is apparently the first time that New Zealand has lost a warship deliberately since World War II. Obviously, sometimes navies sink decommissioned ships to make them into wrecks or whatever for diving. This is the first time they've actually lost a ship when they didn't want to since World War II. So anyway, yes, straight away out of New Zealand, there were a lot of reports, a lot of praise for the captain. But of course, some people have asked the question, was it the right thing to do, abandoning ship immediately versus trying to fight the fire? Maybe there was no chance of that. And it will be, I'm reserving judgment. I think it'll be really, I'm looking forward to the inquiry coming out. And I intend to read the whole inquiry, the whole report. I'm interested to know what they're going to say about that. So,
hmm
yes, I don't consider myself qualified to judge her actions,
hmm
but nevertheless, I think there is a question about could the ship have been saved, and this will be the type of thing the inquiry will look at. Could the ship have been saved? Had people would have been better if there'd been an attempt to stop the fire versus abandoning ship immediately. I certainly don't presume to be qualified to pass judgment on that, but I will be interested to see what the experts say. I I hope this is a genuine inquiry, and I believe
Yeah.
it's going to be. I don't think that they can afford to whitewash on something like this. I think they will have to be very clear on this. Vernon, you have heard about this in the news because it's been
Um,
global.
yeah, I've seen something about it. Now, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so okay, so first, so just a bit of background. Captain Gray is originally from the UK, and I think has been in New Zealand something like 12 years. Had a was an experienced naval officer in the
Mm-hmm.
Royal Navy, and so
Hmm.
naturally was had an opportunity to join the Royal New Zealand Navy.
Hmm.
Now this is apparently her first command. Um, Now, New Zealand only has a relatively small navy, so I think it's only six capital ships or something along those lines, and they've just lost one of them. So that's a substantial blow to the navy.
Yeah.
My view is, and I'm just merely offering a personal opinion here, that even if she's exonerated, I doubt she'll get another command because it's really with so few ships, I think that they really can't afford to take any sort of chances. So I suspect she'll probably end up in some sort of desk job after this, regardless of the results of the inquiry. But I would just want to add a couple of points. Certainly, my understanding is of naval rules and naval law is that admiralty law is that the captain is responsible for the ship and what happens to it and everything that happens on it. And My understanding is that at least until I don't know if it's still the case, but in the Royal Navy for a long time, apparently, if a ship was lost, it was an automatic court-martial.
Hmm.
So the officer was up against a court-martial just by virtue of having lost a ship, even if they may find the person not guilty and there was nothing they could do to save it. But that is effectively a form of inquiry as well. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm looking forward to the report. I will read the entire report and I'll fill you in on that.
Hmm.
But one thing that came out of this, a couple of points actually. So I just want to add Captain Gray,
Hmm.
obviously is a woman, right? She also
Yes,
happens to be a lesbian and has a
of
wife.
course.
Yep. And so some people have um, suggested that she might have been a DEI hire. Okay, I can't comment
Hmm.
on whether she was or she wasn't.
Right.
Uh, and there've been some people who have raised concerns over that about whether she was was being hired on merit or not. And that's something I hope that the inquiry looks at. But the defence minister is a woman by the name in New Zealand at the moment, is a woman by the name of Judith Collins. And she has come out already in support of the captain, insofar as she said that a number of people have said that Captain Gray crashed the ship because she was a woman, or I think possibly also because she was a lesbian. That's not really what's being said, but
Hmm.
that's what the defence minister has tried to assert. People are saying, and
Right.
I think that's a straw man argument. Essentially,
Yeah.
she's claiming the counter argument is weaker than it really is. Now the question is diversity, equity, and inclusion this involved
Hmm.
in the hiring process?
Right.
Uh, yeah. So again, I'll wait for the inquiry to come out. I was a little bit disappointed by what the defence minister was saying because she seemed to be trying to blame men and calling them. She actually called people who were doing this misogynists.
Mhm. Yeah, because what I'm seeing right now is so this is a headline from the Daily Mail. Cruel trolls target female Navy Commander Yvonne Gray after her 100 million Royal New Zealand Navy ship sank off Samoa. What else? We
Yeah.
got Women's Agenda. This is the website called Women's Agenda. A Navy ship caught fire and capsized. People are blaming the captain's gender and sexuality.
Which
Now,
is not actually the case. They're
it's
raising the
not.
possibility to the
It's
DEI hire.
right. Exactly. So if this were a male captain and generally straight, I suppose, and has nothing to do with the DEI and the public consciousness, we won't have these headlines at all. We will it'll be assumed that there'll be court martials, that the captain is always held to account because that's the way it is in ships, right? So
That's right.
what
Exactly.
so the DEI is more, if it's not present in the hire, it is present in the reaction, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes. I
Yeah.
think that makes sense.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was disappointed by the comments by the defence minister, which essentially were mirroring essentially what you just read from the Women's Agenda
Mhm.
site.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't think it was really appropriate comments for for a senior member of government. Interestingly enough, there's videos online. I think I may actually publish this on A Voice for Men. This one of the videos.
Mhm.
It's got which just goes into the things that Judith Collins said. Uh, Apparently, one person who was very critical of Captain Grey happened to be a man from Melbourne in Australia,
Mhm.
and I think also maybe a blue collar worker or a tradie or something like that. And Judith Collins was actually quite critical and took the point that a tradie shouldn't be can't be passing judgment over, doesn't have the experience to pass judgment over naval matters, right? But Judith Collins herself is actually a trained lawyer and also has no specific experience. Even though she's the defense minister, she has no specific naval experience. So if the tradie from Melbourne can't pass judgment, then neither, quite frankly, can Judith Collins.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Oh, we should also use the term keyboard admirals. I like that. Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
So
Mhm.
yeah, bit of a ridiculous comment from
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. It is kind of weird that comment. I mean, everybody clearly uses keyboards. I'm assuming she uses ink and feather.
That's right, exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
And carrier pigeons. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, this reminds me of if civilization were left in female hands. We know the grass huts ones. Maybe we'll
That was
be
Camille
using
Parker.
carrier pigeons and ink and feather as well. So
As a complete aside, are you aware that somebody has actually pinged over a carrier pigeon?
uh, really,
Done an internet ping over a carrier pigeon. It's a true story.
I don't think I heard that one.
Okay, so there's actually, do you know what the RFCs are? Getting a bit technical, but the request for comments documents. So they're
Request for
actually,
comments. I think I'm somewhat
yeah.
familiar then. Yeah.
So they're the documents that define how the internet functions, and there are funny ones that are published from time to time, but because of the way the rules work, they're technically official, even though they're meant to be a joke.
Mhm.
And so some years ago, on the 1st of April, sometime in the mid-90s or something, they published one called Avian Carrier Protocol, which was
Mhm.
internet access over carrier pigeon. And so one year, a couple of years later, a German carrier pigeon club got together with the German Linux user group
Mhm.
and implemented it. And they actually pinged on a computer, printed it out, wrapped it up and put it on the leg of the carrier pigeon, let the carrier pigeon go. The carrier pigeon was, arrived at the other end. They pulled the thing out, scanned it, and sent it on its way to the ping, and then responded back the other way.
Mm,
And it took several hours.
interesting.
Anyway, that was so
Yeah.
they've actually pinged over carrier pigeon.
Mhm.
I haven't thought about that in years, actually. Uh, but anyway, that was quite an aside, and hopefully I didn't lose anybody on the technical details there. But yeah, it's actually an official. It's not only is it legal to do it, it's actually been done.
Yeah.
So,
It's
do you want to
yeah. You
talk
had to be.
about?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No. I'm just saying you had to be quite a bit of a hobbyist to do that kind of a stuff.
Exactly, that's right. I
Like,
mean, it's actually quite a memorable thing. As I said, it was a German carrier pigeon club and German Linux user group who got together, and I guess one Saturday that's how they spent their day. So
mhm,
it's probably quite a rewarding day. It would have been fun.
mhm.
So I've got a couple of historical items to mention, but did you want to talk about Barack Obama's comments first?
No. I was only commenting on the fact that I'm not horribly good at coming up with stuff for the podcast, but I have heard of one thing to just throw in there. And what else can we say about that comment? I mean, it's just him being a complete simp. He always was. He always was women's public property. He was during his time as president. He was during his election campaign. He did everything to get on the good side of women in general and also people who operate out of complete resentment. Like one quote that stands out hugely in my mind is "You didn't build that." That was one thing he said. Like any given thing, any business, whatever. His comment was, "You didn't build that," kind of asserting that the workers are more people you hire are the ones that built that and so forth, kind of taking the ownership away from that capitalistic sense. And yeah, he
Right.
was really being a Marxist for sure, to say the least. And and he was. he was such an insidious president to me. I'm just saying that, and he still is pretty. Uh, I can't believe people still listen to this guy.
So I have some comments from him. I've actually got him on Wiki for Men.
Hmm.
So first comment, uh, if you look at the world and look at the problems, it's usually old people, usually old men not getting out of the way. So that's the first comment, first quote rather. The second one, now women, I just want you to know you are not perfect, but what I can say pretty indisputably is that you're better than us. And by that he means men.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And the third quote, I'm absolutely confident that 2 years, that for 2 years, if every nation on earth was run by women, you would see a significant improvement across the board on just about everything, living standards and outcomes. That's the third quote I've got, and fourth one I've got at a fundraising event hosted by entertainers Jay-Z and Beyonce. He said to J and B, "Thank you so much for your friendship. Beyonce could not be a better role model for girls." And I don't know if you
Yeah.
keep up much Beyonce's activity. I don't, but I'm not sure. I think there are better role models for girls out there. Let's just say that.
Yeah, to be sure. I mean, I do my best to avoid Beyonce, but
Yes, me too, actually. But
yeah.
yes, I do think there are certainly better role models for girls out there.
Yeah.
So, interestingly enough, this is a bit of an aside. I actually didn't have this on my list, but I'll mention it while I'm thinking about it. I have just happened to, it's Sunday here, and I just happened to be, I think you're going into Sunday at the moment. I
Mhm.
just happened to be watching some videos from Australia in the 1960s, and it was interesting actually. They're actually originally designed, these videos were actually originally done for Europeans, basically encourage Europeans to come and immigrate to Australia in the 1960s. So they, showed apparently a lot of Europeans thought that there was nothing but bush and out here. So they'd say, look, Australia has cities. Anyway, but I did notice they showed a beach scene because they show that off a lot because they encourage people, look, beach lifestyle. Uh, the bikinis were really, they had a lot of material. It was really
Mhm.
interesting. I mean, I knew that was the case, but it was really
Mhm.
interesting to watch the videos and go, okay, they're not at all like the bikinis of today. I don't know if they're actually called bikinis at that point, but
Yeah.
yeah, they really were. They quite a lot of material. It was kind of interesting
Mhm.
how much material has been lost over the
Yeah.
last few
Exactly.
decades. Yeah,
Yep.
it's interesting. And I watched them all the women, all the girls. They all had these sort of bikinis. Probably have 3 or 4 times the material on them. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I've got a couple of historical items to mention.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I'm writing a book and I'm a bit of a history geek. So, I was going through today and just happened to see was reminded of a couple of things that happened historically about 2,000 years ago. And I think they're still relevant today. So,
Mhm.
the first one I want to mention is Boudica. So, Boudica is actually fairly well known. Uh, but essentially, Boudica was the wife of a king of the king of a tribe called the Iceni. I think I do have his name here somewhere. But anyway, oh yes, oh gosh, his name is Prasutagus. So anyway, he died, and the convention at the time. So he was an ally of Rome. He was the Iceni were a tribe in what is now England before the
Mhm.
Romans had conquered England, and he was an ally of Rome. That was something a lot of people don't know actually. That there were a lot of tribes when the Romans invaded. Britain, it was actually at the request of their allies because
Mm.
they were allied with a number of tribes in England essentially, and these tribes were actually some of them were having problems with their neighbors and needed support, and they actually encouraged the Romans to invade. But anyway, so the king died, and the convention at the time was that allies of Rome should leave their kingdom to the Roman emperor on their death. But the king, Prasutagus, defied this and told the Iceni that his kingdom, after he died, would be jointly ruled by the Roman emperor as well as his daughters. Now, very important point. And if anybody has read some of the other articles I've written about this sort of thing, like, for example, the articles on Elizabeth I and Mary and so forth in England, what you see time and time again, remember, this is happening 1,500 years before that, okay, and 2,000 years ago
Mhm.
now. what you see time and time again is that people are not rejecting women as leaders. So if you believe the feminist idea of patriarchy, men were oppressing women, men were systematically oppressing women,
Mm.
and women were never considered to be for leaders as leaders. And one of the key points I make in my book and in my articles and my other and my ICMI presentations is that time and time again you see women, aristocratic women, considered for leadership roles. And here we have it again with the Iceni. So they were going to share. He wanted his daughters to share control with the Roman Emperor. Rome basically rejected this and said, "No, that's not the agreement. You're meant to leave your kingdom to us." So they invaded, and in the end, they actually they whipped Boudica and raped her daughters. And so then Boudica launched a revolt against Rome. And the revolt was initially successful, but eventually the Roman military machine crushed the rebellion. Anyway, so Boudica is very, very well known and sometimes gets held up as a feminist icon, actually, interestingly enough. But in reality, the story of Boudica shows us yet again that men were quite happy for their daughters to rule. And it was often the case they would prioritize sons, but there were reasons for that too, because the daughters had the important role of making sure that the family line continued. But if there were no sons or whatever, they would just quite happily leave the kingdom to their daughters or leave their wives or daughters in charge. So anyway, apparently Boudica herself escaped. They don't know what happened to the daughters, I think. But anyway, so that's the story of Boudica. As I said, very well known today. But I'm going to mention another one. Now, this is another queen. She was a queen of a tribe called the Brigantes. If anybody has ever played, any board gamers out there, board gaming is pretty common these days. If you ever play a game called Britannia, it's about 1,000 years of British history. You will see the Brigantes there because it's one of the tribes actually in the game. So yes, I've known about the Brigantes for a long time, but originally I learned about them from the game. Anyway, the Brigantes had a queen by the name of Kenti Mandua. And this is in northern England, by the way. These often the area of these tribes is often relatively small. So we've got a sort of part of northern England, essentially the territory of the Brigantes. They were a Celtic tribe. Cartimandua is only a little bit after Boudica's time. So she was loyal to Rome, and they just arrived in Britain. So this is only a few years after what happened with Boudica. So a British resistance leader sought the protection of Cartimandua after he was defeated by the Romans in battle. And she handed him straight over to the Romans in chains. And Cartimandua was rewarded for this and went on to divorce her first husband. So she seems to have taken the throne at this point, and her husband actually raised an army and came back. So again, what do we have here? Another woman taking the throne. This is only a few years after Boudica. So Boudica is, you can hear people say Boudica is an isolated incident. No, we've got another one happening only a few years later, right? So Cartimandua is now on the throne of the Brigantes, and her husband has raised an army. And of course, Cartimandua was an ally of Rome. So the Romans have rescued her. So what have we got here? The Romans keeping a woman on the throne in favor of a man. I'm not sure what sort of patriarchy we're supposed to be running here, right?
Right, yeah. And Rome is more known for being known by some as one of the more actual patriarchies.
Supposedly. Exactly.
Supposedly,
That's right.
yeah, right.
That's right, exactly. And I will clarify, in the sense that the original sense of patriarchy, that a father ruled the family, yes, Rome was most definitely a patriarchy in that sense. But in the sense that feminists usually mean, yes, I think it's on far weaker footing. And here we have Rome backing up a queen over her husband. So anyway, yeah, but anyway, I think the husband raised another army, and then at this point, Rome was, I think their resources were a bit limited. They weren't able to come to her rescue again. So she ended up fleeing the kingdom, and he ended up taking back control by force. But we don't know what happened to her after that. But that's just that she lost the battle, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, she had the support of Rome, at least during the first attack against her, and was able to fend off the attack. So you see this through history. In fact, one of the reasons it's taken me so long to read the book, write the book, is I kept coming up with new examples of this exact phenomenon happening, where time and time again, women are able to rule if
Mhm.
if the society considers it appropriate for them to do so, like they're a member of the royal family or whatever.
Mhm.
In
Yeah.
fact, I ended up concluding as a result of this that a common phenomenon is essentially in cases historically where women wanted to pick up a traditionally male role. In general, it seems the men let them. This seems to be
Mhm.
a common theme that I've seen through my
Mhm.
research.
Yeah.
So anyway, a few years after Boudica's not an isolated incident. We've got another queen on a
Mhm.
Celtic throne, and we've got Rome backing her up in this case.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's obviously something wrong with the patriarchy we're running, right?
Mhm. Yeah, we haven't done a very good job.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So those are all the items I of course want to mention Zoe McClellan before we finish up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
do you have any other ones you want to mention?
Yeah, just something to add. So, it's I do I suppose it kind of seems a bit unfair that, uh you you mentioned with Yvonne Gray, she was the first one to sink an entire ship that wasn't in World War II, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It just seems like, like when this must happen, and it turns out to be a woman, then I guess the sentiment is, well, maybe it was because she was a woman or something like that. We're not saying that's exactly the case. Just kind of that's the sort of mindset that you'd kind of be forced to entertain one way or the other.
So, and there is actually one other point I wanted to mention. I actually meant to mention this earlier, so I'm glad we've returned. So, and I'm not making any sort of presumption as to guilt
Yeah.
or culpability or anything,
Mhm.
but it's actually the case that New Zealand has a number of female captains on their ships at the moment.
Okay. Yep.
Another one of the female captains,
Mhm.
well, while she was in charge of the ship, crashed into a dock. I'm not making any sort of presumption about whether,
Mhm.
any culpability other than the fact that the captain has responsibility for the ship, and what sort of error may have led to this. And I don't know whether the New Zealand government has finished the report on that one yet, because
Yeah.
the ship wasn't didn't sink obviously, but it was damaged, and I believe required some repair work. But in any case, that's been brought up as well. So
Mhm.
my only concern here, I'm not concerned if the captains are women or lesbians or whatever. I am
Yep.
concerned if people are being hired other than on merit.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
I want to make that clear. That
Mhm.
has always been my concern.
Yep. Yep. That's for the most part all I had to add on that one. So,
No problem. So yes, and I'll tell you more on both of those incidents actually when we know more about them. All right, I am going to talk about Zoe McClellan.
let's do it.
As of October 2024, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McClellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McClellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in the area. McClellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McClellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McClellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. That's it.
Yep.
Carthage must be
All right.
destroyed.
All right.
Thank you.
So 2 weeks, I guess,
Yep. Talk to you
or
then.
2 weeks. Is that still good for your trip and everything?
Yes, I think so. Yes, yes. Yes, I should be all good. Thank you.
Okay. So, all right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
good. All right. All right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.